Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive with us. And today we're going to be talking about something really fundamental to the human experience, language.
Oh, yeah, it's everywhere, right? But we hardly ever stop to think about it.
Exactly. We're going to be unpacking a lecture by Dr. Tayyib Bouaza where he breaks down a Quranic verse about language. And it's fascinating stuff. It gets into how language shapes our thoughts, our perceptions, even things like economic systems.
That's right. There's this really powerful idea in the Quran where God gives Adam the first gift, and that gift is language.
Okay, so what do you mean like God taught Adam how to speak?
Yeah, the verse says, God taught Adam all the names. So it's not just about communication, but about the power of naming things, understanding them, categorizing them.
So that's like the foundation of knowledge, right? Being able to name things.
Exactly. And Dr. Barraza really emphasizes that point. It's like the building block for how we make sense of the world around us.
But what does all the names actually mean? I feel like that could be interpreted in a lot of different ways.
Well, you're right. Some scholars have debated whether it means Adam was taught every language on Earth. But Dr. Buadza argues that it's something even deeper.
Deeper, how?
He suggests that all the names refers to the capacity for language itself, like the inherent ability to name and categorize the world we experience.
Mm. So less about specific words and more about the power that language gives us.
Exactly. That's what makes us human in a way, this ability to understand and interact with reality through language.
And he uses a really interesting story to illustrate this point, right? Something about an anthropologist and bartering.
Oh, yeah, this one's a classic. So this anthropologist is studying a remote tribe in Guinea-Bissau, and he observes this system of trade.
What's so special about their trading?
Well, they'll trade one bow for 2 bundles of wheat. Seems simple enough, right? But it turns out there's a reason why they do it that way.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the reason?
Their language, they only have words for one, two, and many.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
So their language literally shapes how they do business?
It totally does. They can't really conceptualize quantities beyond 2, so their economic system is limited by their vocabulary.
That's mind-blowing. I mean, you hear people say that language shapes thought, but this is a real-world example.
It really is. And it gets you thinking, how many other ways is our language limiting our understanding without us even knowing it?
Okay, now that is a question I want to explore further. We'll be right back after a short break. So before the break, we were talking about how this tribe's language actually limits their trading system.
It's pretty incredible, right? It really highlights the power of language, you know?
Yeah, like we might think we're in control, but in a way, language is shaping our reality. It's kind of freaky when you think about it.
It is. And Dr. Boaza takes it even further. He says that the way we categorize things with language, it's like a double-edged sword.
Oh, so.
On the one hand, it's useful,
Right.
right? It helps us organize our thoughts and understand the world. But on the other hand, it can also create these mental traps.
Mental traps.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. We create these categories with language, and then we start to believe that the categories themselves are real and absolute, like they exist independently of language.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like we forget that they're just tools we've created.
Exactly. And sometimes those tools can be used in harmful ways, you know?
Yeah, I mean, think about how language has been used throughout history to justify discrimination. Putting people into categories based on race or gender or whatever, and then treating them differently because of those labels.
Exactly. It's like the categories become self-fulfilling prophecies. So it's really important to be critical of the language we use and to constantly question the assumptions that are baked into it.
So we need to be aware of how language can limit us. But Dr. Bouaza also talks about the creative power of language, right? Like how it can be used to imagine new possibilities.
Oh, absolutely. He says that language isn't just about describing reality, but also about creating new realities.
That's a powerful idea. So how do we do that? How do we use language to create new realities?
Well, for one thing, we can invent new words. We can challenge existing categories. And we can find new ways of speaking that better reflect the world we want to live in.
So we're not just trapped by the limitations of language. We can actually use it to expand our understanding and create positive change.
Precisely. It's an ongoing process.
Mm.
You know, language is constantly evolving and adapting, and we all have a role to play in shaping that evolution.
This is seriously making me think differently about language. It's not just about communication. It's about shaping reality for better or worse.
That's a great way to put it.
And it leads to the big question that Dr. Bouaza poses at the end of his lecture. If language shapes our perception of reality so profoundly, how might the limitations of our languages be limiting our understanding of the universe?
Whoa, now that is a mind-blowing question.
Right. Like, what are we missing out on because of the way we speak? What possibilities are we unable to even imagine because our language doesn't have the words for them? I don't know about you, but I'm like looking at the world totally differently now.
Yeah, it's kind of like putting on a new pair of glasses. You start noticing things you never saw before.
Totally. So if we had to like boil it all down, what would you say is the most important thing for our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is just realizing that language isn't passive. It's not just a neutral tool for communication.
It's active. It shapes how we think.
Exactly. And how we see the world, even how we act in the world. And once we understand that, we can start to use language more consciously, more deliberately.
To create the reality we want.
Yeah, to challenge those limitations that we were talking about, to break free from those mental traps and, maybe even start to imagine possibilities that were beyond our grasp before.
Okay, so like language is both the problem and the solution.
Yeah, in a way, I guess you could say that. It's both the cage and the key.
That's a great way to put it. Wow, this has been an incredible conversation. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. It's always fascinating to delve into these deep questions about language and thought.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
And to all of our amazing listeners out there, keep those deep dives coming. We'll be back next time with another mind-blowing topic.